The same configuration applies equally to mobile devices. Here we can see my mobile device has the IP address 172.16.66.137. I'll set this IP address on my debugger shortcut. I have my Uniface application, and I'll specify the same DEB command line switch and set the appropriate port number. So in this case I'm creating the listener on the mobile device on the same port, so 13097. So if I start the application on the mobile device, we can see the icon to say the application has started. If I now start my debugger, it connects to the mobile device. We can see the application started, and I'm now debugging the mobile code. So my mobile application is running. If I do a debug halt and do an action on the device, we can see the debugger picks it up. Remote debugging works for the web as well, so for connecting to a U server. If I go into my uRouter assignment file and add the TCP option, restart my uRouter to pick up the changes, change my IP address to the host machine, and now run the application. We can see that it's waiting, and as soon as I start the debugger, it connects and I can now debug the application. When debugging a web application, it is possible that multiple U servers could start. In this case, it is possible to start a debugger per U server that starts. However, this can become unmanageable. Therefore, an additional setting can be added to the uRouter assignment file. If we add max equals 1, this constrains the uRouter to only starting one instance of that U server. Any parallel requests will be queued. These can then be debugged in a serial fashion. We will now look at re-entrant debugging. Under normal circumstances, if we exit a debugger while it's attached to a runtime application, it will also end that application. So if I exit this debugger, we can see the application also exits. This is not always desirable, especially when supporting a live site. One way to address this is to be able to use re-entrant debugging, that is, being able to close a debugger and reattach it at a later date if required. To do this, we just use remote debugging, but in the opposite way to what we did before. What we do now is set up the debugger as a TCP host and have the runtime process as a TCP client. So if I open my two shortcuts, so that's my runtime application, and that's my debugger. On the debugger, I'll change this to create. And on my runtime application, I'll change this to no wait. I'm using no wait in this case because I don't want the runtime application to have to wait for the debugger before it starts processing. I can now start my runtime normally and use it. At any point I can then start the debugger. And a debugger attaches. So I can debug my code. When I complete my debug session, I can exit the debugger and the application remains and functions normally. If at a later time I then need to reattach the debugger, I can start it again. In this case I need to signal to the application that it has to reconnect, so in this case I'll just hit my debug button and again the debugger attaches. And I can debug again. Now there are a couple of points to watch for. When using the debugger in this style, before exiting the debugger, make sure you don't have any breakpoints remaining. To clear that, just do debug clear all breakpoints. Also, don't exit the debugger while it's currently debugging. If you do that, it will also exit the application. So if I exit the debugger now, we can see that the application also exits. I will now show the different options for breakpoints. Breakpoints allow you to set a marker in code so that you don't have to step through every statement to get to the area of interest. If I start a debug session and step to my read trigger, this might be my particular area of interest, so I can set a breakpoint. If I now hit go, whenever that breakpoint is hit, the debugger will break. So I do a retrieve and we can see it stopped on the read. To make setting breakpoints easier, we can also browse through the code. That is, we don't need to step through every line of code in order to set our breakpoints. If I do view browser, I can see the various elements of the component and look at the triggers. So I'll add a breakpoint to clear. I'm not only restricted to this component. I can open any of the other components in my repository and also set breakpoints on those. Another option I have with breakpoints is to set conditional breakpoints. If we look at the read breakpoint I've already set, I might decide that I only want to break on the 5th occurrence. If I say debug, edit breakpoints, we can see my read breakpoint that's been defined, and I can add my condition. If I say $curroc district, which is my entity, equals 5, this is saying that this breakpoint will only take effect on the 5th occurrence. So if I now do my retrieve, we can see it's done the break on the read. If I take a look at the current occurrence, we can see I'm on occurrence 5. If I hit go, we'll see that it doesn't break again on that read because it's no longer on occurrence 5.